Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first in the series of our Cookie Countdown series. We are so happy to have you here with us today, and even more pleased to have such an esteemed group of panelists. And we are really looking forward to talking together and talking with you guys today. Before we get started, I would like to do some housekeeping. So if you get dropped from the session, just use the same link that you had that you joined with first to join back in. There is closed captioning provided. Just click on the CC button at the bottom. If you have any tech issues, just contact our virtual producer via the chat box. And we want this to be fun. We want it to be interactive. We want to hear from you, and we want to answer your questions and have a dialogue with you involved as well. So please do answer any questions, make any comments you want in the Q&A box, and Jonathan, our moderator, will be happy to go through those and add those to our ongoing conversation. So without any further ado, I will pass over the conversation to our esteemed and iconic man from the advertising industry, John Durham.
Thank you, Deborah. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are. We're actually very lucky because we're going from London to New York to the Bay Area. So this actually has the impact of both Europe and North America. Fascinating conversation. As you can see by the shot in front of you, that the people we have who are going to talk about it are actually not only experts, but people who are just involved in thinking a lot about this and a lot of other things in the business. I'm going to ask each of them to come on. I think sometimes people can talk about themselves in a better way than read, but if I could get everyone to turn their screens over, I am going to ask Joanna, just tell us a little bit about you as Chief Strategy Officer. Like, I know you're in the UK. Just give us a little bit about you, and then we'll go to Travis and then Jonathan.
Hello, John. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, my name's Joanna Burton. I've been working in advertising for a long time. I am based in London, just opening up after shelter in place for a long time. I work for ID5. We're an independent solution to provide identity for digital advertising. And I've been working in advertising for a long time with ad tech platforms, agencies, various publishers around the world. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, I think we really want to thank all the people, from Adipex who really brought together. I'm lucky to moderate a great group. Travis, hello, you're down the street. We're both in San Francisco.
Hey, John, good morning and great to be here. So I'm Travis Klinger. I lead all of our addressability products and BD and go-to-market efforts at LiveRamp. LiveRamp's a data connectivity platform. Our role is to connect marketers' first, second, and third-party data globally to publisher inventory and allow marketers to personalize the consumer journey. Looking forward to this discussion.
It's going to be a good one, and I think we're going to end up, with a really good friend, someone that I have an immense respect for, who just a great person. Let's go back to the center of North American universe, our friend Jonathan Adams.
Thanks so much, John. I'm not sure how to respond to that, but I love you back. So I'm Jonathan Adams. I've been in the digital space for a long time, in the media space the entire time of my career. I'm today with Wavemaker, and Wavemaker is a media agency, and we positively provoke growth for our clients by challenging everything. We challenge conventions and push our clients into uncomfortable spaces. And this panel is absolutely perfect to discuss that and to think about it that way. So I'm looking forward to chatting with Travis and Joanna and John, and happy to take your guys' questions today because this should be fun. Thank you for having us.
I want to open up, please do send questions because this is obviously very important. Yes, we are going to be recording and it'll be available. We're going to have great insights. The first question is the cookie countdown, the obvious, not that we're looking for a specific date, a specific time, but for people who are just like, tangentially in the know, what do you think that means? I mean, like Travis, it's, is this going to be gradual, or does May 10th all of a sudden the world shut down and there are no cookies? How do you react to the title?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to call out that we already have a world without cookies. It's Safari, Firefox, and Edge. So 40% of the internet today is cookieless, and marketers looking to connect to consumers in those channels have to use IDs other than third-party cookies. You know, I think as we look towards next year, when Chrome does finally deprecate the cookie, it looks like it's going to be more of a switch off, like, you know, kind of like what we saw this week with the ATT rollout. So, you know, that was in an iOS upgrade. Probably some users have to update their Chrome laptops. We've done some analysis. It takes about a month for the new Chrome version to fully roll out. So we're probably looking about a month, but a pretty quick end of the cookie there. And I think so that the message that we always tell marketers is the world's already very cookieless, and now is the time for action. Like it's really, we've got to move beyond the theoretical into the practical and to the action-oriented time.
Joanna, any comment further?
Yeah.
Good answer.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Travis. We are already very cookieless. I mean, third-party cookieless in a lot of the internet. And we do kind of know that third-party cookies don't work that brilliantly on many accounts, right? So it's not so bad. We've been preparing for it for a while. We have these kind of practice environments with Firefox and Safari and Edge now, but it isn't. The match rates don't work that well with third-party cookies anyway. So a lot of companies have to pay for additional cookie matching services. So that will go away when we don't have cookies to match. And also, they're just not great for privacy. They're not legal under many regulations around the world. And publishers' data is being broadcast throughout the world to people that don't have any relationship or right to access that data. So the cookies are on the clock. The countdown has begun. There are alternatives that are working now, but we still do have a lot of work to do to get ready for both the end of third-party cookies and also the decline of the IDFA, which, as Travis has said, has started.
Jonathan, you want to weigh in because I want to get back to IDFA in a few minutes. Jonathan, any comment on the
Sure,
title?
yeah. And thinking about the cookie countdown, and this is really an opportunity for marketers who may have been on the sideline, as you hinted in the setup, to take a stand and be intentional about their data strategies. I think for a long time, marketers have leaned on the cookie, as we've talked about so many times. It was a flawed tool from the beginning, and we've let it go on far too long. But that said, it has served a purpose, and now marketers that haven't formed a data strategy, that haven't hired the right people, that haven't thought about connecting themselves to the right partners, this is totally the time to do it, because next year will be too late. And we'll talk a lot about it during the panel, but it is important for marketers to create a plan and get serious about their data strategy.
I agree. Joanna, you mentioned privacy. Privacy is, just one of those buzzwords that everybody deals with. In the United States, there's not a centralized privacy. Florida's coming out with a typical Florida response. You've got California and Nevada. So instead of having a federal regulation, it looks like we're going to have probably 30 different regulations. How do you think the privacy issue is going to matter in this?
Well, I think the privacy is critical because what you're essentially talking about is how do you engage with the different users of the websites or the different customers of the brands? Are you taking data? Do they understand that? Is there some sort of exchange? Do they understand the exchange? I think that the whole question is really pivotal. I think that, and I'm sure we'll cover this, many companies are using privacy, they're privacy washing, as an excuse for doing things that really are not in the best interest of their users. But regardless of that, there are steps that we can all take as an industry to ensure that we are not, working with personal data if the consumer hasn't consented to that in markets where you need to consent. And in general, I feel like that's the way the industry is going anyway. The regulation is heading in that direction anyway. So we founded our company around the time of GDPR in Europe, and I feel like that's going to be the most stringent global legislation that we'll have, but various flavors are coming in Canada and in other countries. So really respecting the consumer and working with them to understand the value exchange, like are they getting something free in return for their data, either on the brand side or the publisher side, I think is the best way for us to have a more sustainable advertising industry going forward.
In talking Travis, and we've had some really good hype conversations. I think you all have taken the lead in identity. For the first thing, how do you define identity? I think LiveRamp has put a stake in the ground. Identity does seem something that marketers are, getting texture around. If you're talking to a marketer, what should they be thinking about when it comes to identity?
It's a great question, because identity can mean a bunch of different things. You've got a marketer's first party identity, which can be anything from that marketer's first party cookie, which is great for site personalization. So I know this cookie, or I don't know who this cookie is, but I know they always come to my travel page. So I'm going to make sure that that travel page is featured when they land on the site. Then you've got a marketer's CRM data. I have an authentication. I have a relationship with this consumer. Maybe they're a card member of mine. Maybe they're a rewards member of mine. So I know a lot about them. And there's different aspects of that. Maybe I have an email address, I have a phone number, or a name and postal address. And so tying all of that together. And then on the publisher side, you have the same. So you have the idea of a publisher's first party identity on that publisher site. So it's just their first party cookie. Then you've got publisher's authentication. So identity that can be connected across the publisher's site and also to marketers. And then you have a new type of identity that's coming up, and this is cohort level identity. And so this is going to be your flocks, your parakeets. Hopefully we get one more bird named. I think Safari can still give us another bird named acronym. I'm optimistic. So you've got your cohorts as well. And I think, today we used the whole idea in the terms of the third party cookie and everything linked to the third party cookie. And now in the future, you're going to be using a myriad of these identities. First party cookie identity, where you have it. So that's going to work on publisher sites. Authenticated identity is going to be the gold standard because it works everywhere, but it's going to be the most limited type. And then cohort level identity. And that's going to vary by browser as well. And so I think what a challenge for both marketers and publishers is none of these are a silver bullet. And you have to use all three of them in their different aspects to have a holistic solution.
Yeah, I agree with Travis. If I could just add, there's always going to be some people who don't consent to using their personal data, and then you'll have some contextual targeting, I'm sure. And of all of the solutions that you suggested, not all of them are actually available now. So there are first-party cookie solutions available. There's authenticated data solutions. The cohorts is still idea, right, Travis? Yeah. So cohorts is a proposal, and another element to add is not going to be available in all geos, so it's not legal in Europe. And that's because Google is deciding who's going to be in the cohort, and the consumers don't get any choice. They don't get the option to opt out. There's no engagement. There's no, back to my earlier point, there's no opportunity to engage with the consumer and ask them if they're okay with having a value exchange for some tracking in return for a better user experience or more personalized experience, more personalized advertising. So several solutions available at different levels in different countries.
Well, then that begs a question. And Jonathan, as you're sitting there talking directly with the brands and all, what are the brands saying? I mean, what are, and I know you interact with a lot of agencies, is in this sea of confusion, how do we get clarity?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. Brands, as I said before, are taking this seriously, but this is an opportunity for them to do so, and we're certainly making that clear. There's a lot of things that brands are going to have to get used to in the coming year. They're going to have to get used to a little bit of a gray area, where as we start to test and learn and try each of these new methodologies as they become mature. To Joanna's point, not everything is even available today, but we're going to have to be ready to try them and test them and make sure that we're seeing what works for each brand and each marketer. As I think I joked about in the prep call, people are going to have to get used to living with both VHS and Betamax at the same time for a while, because it's going to be messy. And while there may be a tech or a targeting approach that will win ultimately, we're not going to know for a long time. And so we're going to have to get used to trying them all out and trying not to be too judgmental of the systems that are being released, because we may well need them in the long run.
But I bet you're having a lot of inquiries from your clients, right? There just seems to me to be a huge demand for education. Webinars like this are so useful right now. So thanks to the Adapex guys, but you must have the brands that you work with just clamoring for information from you.
Yeah, it's funny you say it. So, I mean, our sort of MO is to begin with education as much as possible. We have webinars like these actually for each client. We actually customize them client by client, but we have the story is fairly similar. So it begins with education. Then we do an audit. So we have a basically a cookie dependence audit that we do for all of our clients to help them understand what their risk assessment is and where they are and where they stand, what they need. And then of course it's developing a plan of action. None of it has to happen overnight, but giving them a plan for how to take control of their first party data, take control of their targeting, and take control of this sea change.
And I think, Jonathan, to that point, it's so important that like clients understand what a big deal this is. I think, you know, when we go talk to some of our marketers, sometimes, you know, we get the feedback of, great, we just switched from third-party cookies to this. And it's like, oh no, it's actually not that simple. You need to go through all your KPIs. You have 100+ tags running on your page. All of those use third-party cookies. You need to your point, do the audit. And it's really a massive project. And then when you start to look at the change, well, if it happens in January is getting really close, particularly when you then factor in that most folks are in code change and all laser focused on their holiday campaigns for the last 3 months of the year. And this timeline gets really tight. And that's why, you know, our biggest message to marketers is begin testing now. Like start testing with these solutions. Joanna, to your point, you know, not all of them are available, but a lot of them are. And even if you're, you know, if you are lucky to be enough to be selected by Google to test the flocks in DV360, I think that's a great opportunity for clients. But like to really lean in and pick a few of these and start testing. Because I think one thing we're worried about is that clients are still in the planning phase, and we need to get to that testing and doing phase.
Yeah.
And Travis, in light of that, I talked to a couple marketers, a few to like get some questions, and you know, one, you know, typical yes to, you know, am I dealing? Is this just another flavor of the hour? And then you have Apple this week with all the hoopla and the you know, hoopla obfuscation, typical Apple getting everybody upset. What do you tell the marketer who is sitting there like, okay, this is just a flavor of the day. I'm just not, you know, I'm just going to wait. I'm not going to be the first mover. I'm going to sort of be second. What do you tell them? Because I think you just made some really good points. If you were in front of them, what would you say to her?
So I think I would say the first mover was actually probably a year and a half ago. So we're already into that second stage. And so, you know, at LiveRamp, we've got over 5% of all of our clients are already only buying on cookieless identity. They've completely shifted over, not using third-party cookies in their workflow. And, you know, that's moving from the testing to the fully executing. So I think to the market, I would say these are solutions that work. They're proven. You can test them now, and it's time to dip your toe in the water. It's take one campaign. Like it starts easy. You have an audience-based campaign, take that, move that over to people-based identity. You're running a campaign with a publisher, maybe using your first-party cookie data mapped to a third-party cookie to their inventory. Well, why don't you take instead some of their first-party cookie data and run a campaign that way? Measure the results, see what the KPIs look like. I think it's really dipping that toe in the water. Because now we're past the first movers. The first mover is already entirely buying on cookieless. We're into that second and third mover stage. And I think it's also really sitting down and mapping out. So what we do when we talk to marketers is we kind of map out what they need to do between now and September to be in a good position for that holiday campaign. And suddenly it starts looking like a much tighter timeline.
So I really agree with that. And I feel really pleased that you guys have got this all mapped out for the buyers on both sides. So that's really heartening to hear that. I think that it does look really complicated. The first mover was a long time ago, as you said, Travis. We have a lot of people buying first-party cookies only in Europe for the GDPR reasons as well. But in addition to that, it's not as complicated as some people are making it sound, right? There are some things coming out all the time saying there's like 80 different identity providers, and actually we're not comparing apples and apples here. So you need to just streamline. There's 3 leaders in the identity solutions, and there's all the other data companies and different things to bear in mind, but it's not as complicated as it looks. There are people who have incentives to make it look more complicated, especially if they're busy running a walled garden at the same time. But definitely speak with these guys if you're a brand or an agency about arming yourself with more information, learning and planning. Like sounds like there's a whole plan in place here.
You know, we as marketers sometimes forget we're also customers. Question I often ask marketers, I said, you know, and Jonathan, you and I have talked about this before. I remember people like, oh, you're the people who do those horrible banners that I hate. That's how they view advertising. To someone who's a novice, who doesn't live, breathe, and eat our buzzword bingo. And they're like, oh my God, every site I'm going to now has, do I accept or do I not accept cookies? And I'm like, I don't even know what a cookie is. One of my neighbors is an SVP at B of A. And she goes, I feel like I'm choosing between Oreos and not having Oreos. You know, like, I don't understand. And I'm like, and I explained it to her and she goes, I still don't know what I should do. I said, just accept it and move on. What do you tell people who, like, we're creating this obfuscation because we just want to chest beat and do this? You know, how do you describe this to your mother, to your friends who aren't in our business?
Well, I think, John, like that, you get a key point here is we've got to make it more clear to the consumer that the value exchange is happening. The way I describe it is, you know, look at what the walled gardens do. I want to, you know, I browse Instagram. I get to see and connect with friends and family, see photos, cute animals, all kinds of great things. And I share my identity and I get personalized ads for this. And I think that's what we have to do on the open internet as well. We lost the trust of the consumer. Like publishers and marketers, we lost it. We did these third-party cookies. We've experimented with fingerprinting. As an industry, we never explained what was the value exchange. So I think where it gets to is you have to simplify the privacy policies and then make it really clear. New York Times did a great example of this last year. So in March, when COVID was really hitting the US and everyone was trying to get access to quality content about it, they said, we're going to give the COVID content away. All we're going to ask for you is your email, and we're going to use your email to send you newsletters, and we're going to try to upsell you to a subscription, and we're going to use it to personalize your advertising. They got an incredible amount of emails from that because the consumers got it. Here's a high quality newspaper offering free content in a time of need to the consumer in exchange for identity. And I think we all have to, marketers and publishers, have to start thinking like that. How do I make it really transparent? It's, if you type in your email, you're going to get this. And you know, this is what we're going to do with it. Because to your point, no one understands the cookie banners. When you get the GDPR consent, it's like these 300 companies want these special permissions and these purposes. Like, I work in ad tech. I read the special permissions and stuff to talk to the legal team about like which one does which. So the average consumer doesn't get it. But I think we have to really look to the walled gardens who kind of perfected it by share your email address and get this amazing content. And they've certainly had some errors on their way. But I think they've paved a lot of the path for us.
Jonathan, a question that also surfaced that I thought was interesting. You know, what do you see as the silver lining in true first-party data? Because if, you know, this one marketer said to me, you know, like, I know first-party data is it. What's the silver lining? What should I be thinking about?
So a couple of things. First up, I love the prior question. Would love a crack at it. People still ask me if I'm.
Please, I love all three of you because I think it's important.
Well, people still ask me if I'm responsible for pop-ups. I'm like, dude, we haven't had pop-ups in 12 years. But yes, it is me, and it's my fault. But yeah, if you think about first-party data, there's so many upsides to it, and I think the revelation for a lot of brands lately is your first-party relationships don't have to just be with customers that are in your loyalty program. They can be with customers that you know tangentially that are shoppers. And so collecting first-party data, getting your house in order so that you can have greater control once cookies are gone is a big deal right now. I think that the silver lining is several-fold, I guess. One is, marketers have found that for the targeting via first-party data, especially with direct to publishers or via a proper solution, honestly, it has less fraud, less worry about reaching the wrong people with the wrong message. By using your own data, you really know who you're talking to, and so you have a much better chance of higher conversion rates and higher response rates because the audiences you're talking to already know who you are. So it's always easier to take a current customer and increase them threefold than it is to find somebody off the street and convince them to work with your brand or to buy from your brand. And so it's always easier to grow an existing customer. So first party is part of this age-old wisdom about nurturing and cross-selling and upselling your existing relationships.
Don't forget, if you've got a question, please type in. I mean, as you can tell, this is a really good conversation. And I've gotten some good takeaways myself listening to it. Here's another one that came. And I just sort of laughed at this. You know, she said to me, well, there's third party, there's second party. She said, there's first party. And she said, now a salesperson introduced zero party. And she said, the only thing good about the word zero is Coke Zero. She goes, why would I want to buy anything that has zero data? That implies I'm not buying any value. And I got to tell you, I was stumped at how to answer that. Is zero party data something that's out there in the marketplace? I guess that's
yeah, I take a lot of meetings with friends and leaders in the industry. I have not heard that yet, but I would say that there's context, right? I mean, I think Joanna touched on it earlier. There's contextual that is going to make a comeback, right? I mean, in a world of change, sometimes you fall back on things you know. Context matters, relevance matters, and so context and contextual will become very hot again for a while, as it should be. Maybe never should have stopped being relevant as we all lean toward being precise. I think there's a phrase I wanted to weave in here, which was thinking a bit about the shifting from precision to modeled. I think marketers are so accustomed to targeting broadly one-to-one that really we can still do one-to-one, but I think modeled is becoming a bit more, needs to be thought through more as a bit more of a relevant and appropriate option. And that feeds into your question about, sort of relevance at a scale and whether context matters.
And I think we all share that context does matter. But and then you've got the 800-pound gorilla that has done quite a bit, and that's Apple. And those of us who are in the Apple world, we live, breathe, and eat. We don't even think sometimes that there's any other world but Apple. And they suck us in and they keep us going. How does Apple play in this? I mean, a side product is Apple's getting in the ad business, which I find totally fascinating in my own way. Anybody want to comment? Travis, y'all got to have a position on that.
Yeah, I think our position is when we look at the ATT that rolled out, so the App Tracking and Transparency Framework, part of iOS 14.5. Requires consent from the consumer, so an opt-in. And so we rolled out our solution requiring ATT compliance. I think, at the end of the day, it's Apple's devices and they own the App Store. So they, for better or worse, for now get to set the rules. And so we, as an industry, we've got to embrace that. What I'm excited about ATT, it's overall, it's probably not the most positive thing to happen for the industry. But what I am excited about is it does force us to have this dialogue with the consumer. And publishers are getting really creative in how they do that. So, Facebook kind of led the charge and they said, oh, well, the text in the dialogue is really short. It's hard to explain the value exchange there. So we're going to show everyone a prompt before the dialogue to get them to hit accept. And I have to say, and so maybe this is my ad tech geek coming out. I was one of the first to download the update on Monday. And I was like refreshing my apps and like, how do I get the prompt? Like, what are you doing? Trying to see which each publisher is doing. And so publishers have gotten pretty good at it. I think there's some innovative things as you go through the prompts that you can see of how they're explaining the value exchange. One news publisher that I use, they popped up and said, hey, to provide high quality journalism, we have to serve you ads. Please hit yes on the prompt in the next, or hit I accept on the prompt. I was like, that's really good. And it gets us to a better place. So I think, probably is ATT the right way to do that? No, but it's a great way to kind of push the industry into having this dialogue with the consumer. And so I think it's good also in teaching pubs what they're going to have to do when they start seeing the cookie go away in Chrome. That same dialogue is going to have to happen so that you can get access to the email, get the phone number. Not everyone's going to opt in, but I think we can get that ATT opt-in rate to probably 50% or more. With the right prompts, and it's been really cool to see the collaboration also between the pubs. So like which prompts work, which don't. A/B testing, and I think not the right method to do it. I wouldn't have supported ATT. We're complying with it, but I do think it forces this dialogue that we have as an industry needed to have happen for a while now.
Got a question from John Eckberg. A text-based, he's with the text-based, which I'll introduce in a second, platform independent. It's relatively long. Independent of the porous and vulnerable web. Love those words. Why haven't agencies, I guess, Jonathan, this is coming to you. Why haven't agencies embraced text to create opt-in, permission-based cohorts of AVIDs? Isn't SEO a euphemism for handing off your best leads to your deeper pocketed competition?
Isn't SEO an
A
opportunity
euphemism
to
for
push?
handing off your best leads to your deeper pocketed competition, who can then digitally bomb your prospects with their ads, the old conquest concept. Or not the old, it's a lot of people are using conquesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said, are we using texts for that? I mean, again, I think that the text-based text messaging, text opt-ins are still a tool in the toolbox. I think understanding the role of SEO for a minute, just stepping back. I mean, man, I don't know if I totally concur. I think SEO is a path to uncovering, allowing your content to thrive and shine, and letting people find it. We're massive advocates of SEO. As you think about the waterfall, where does your first dollar and first energy go? It should go to SEO and understanding and optimizing your site as a brand, so that you then pile on paid media to fill in around your own environments, and SEO is at the heart of that. So I'm pretty sure I didn't answer your question, but I'm trying to.
Isn't there, this is a question, Joanna, I'm going to come to you, and obviously I mean, all three of you can weigh in, sort of a rehash of what we talked earlier. Isn't there prompt overload from the customer standpoint? Won't most customers just move on and ignore because they're not digital geeks?
Yeah, there probably is prompt overload. I don't see it myself, but other people have said the same thing to me. They just hit yes. And these are people who work in the industry. So yeah, there is. And then I would just echo what Travis said earlier. I think it's really important that we continue this conversation about the value exchange, so people realize what they're giving up and getting in return. And yeah, I guess the IDFA changes will help educate the rest of the industry, because I mean, our bigger problem, something I worry about much more, is independent publishers, small publishers on the web that have already lost access to third-party cookies and are now looking to us to provide solutions in the first-party environment, and how, if they're not prepared in time, how they'll be able to deal with the coming changes in Chrome. And there's just so many a diversity of publishers that we probably don't or realize how many different things that we all use, like, quick news websites, entertainment sites, specific niche sites, passion sites, maps, I guess, speed of our internet sites, download speed sites. There's just so many that I think, we do need to educate more on the value exchange. It's great to have webinars like this. And I also think it'd be really useful for us to all collaborate with the industry bodies in this space as well, so that they can advocate for the small web publishers, the small mobile publishers, maybe the smaller brands, and continue to set the rules to help work with the regulators and help speak up for the smaller companies that may be a bit overwhelmed, may think they've got to have 22 conversations with different providers and just need some help in how to articulate the value exchange.
Yeah, I'm just going to pile on, if you don't mind, John.
Please.
Joanna, I think that you say something that's really important, and I think Travis touched on it as well. The industry bodies, you think about the point of contact with consumers, brands connect with consumers, publishers connect with consumers, advertisers, frankly, we connect, advertising professionals connect through consumers via publishers and via brands. So, if you think about the ANA, the IAB, the 4As, even the MMA, each of these organizations have an opportunity to teach and educate, inform, and stand up for the little guy. I think that if you look at the membership bodies of the IAB, again, while they are definitely representatives of the big brands and the biggest brands in our industry, but what's beautiful about them is they also represent a lot of little guys. And the same is very true for the 4As. We have lots of little agencies trying to figure this out too in the 4As. And then if you think about the ANA, they are definitely not meant to just represent the P&Gs of the world, they represent everybody. So I think there's a huge opportunity for the trade bodies to collaborate and help us get, from an education perspective, and then help even, I hinted at audits, but maybe help people do self-audits to understand what they can do next to protect themselves, their customers, and be transparent, to your point, Travis, about what the value exchange is for sharing your data.
And
Yeah.
taking what Jonathan said, Travis, this would be the only question I'll get in political. Do you think Washington understands the reality, or are they just chest beating because it's the cool thing to do and makes them sound like that they're taking care of the customer?
So I've gotten to go to the Hill a few times to talk about ad tech now, and the first time we went there, I would say this was maybe 2.5 years ago. We tried to explain RTV. That was it's a fun exercise that didn't go all that well. But then one of the more recent times we went there, they had an understanding of RTV that rivals most of the people in ad tech. Like they brought in some really smart aides, and we're sitting down with them and talking through how identity and how data works, and they were asking incredibly sharp questions. And so, do I think that this creates action? I'm not sure. But I will say, like, they definitely have developed a better understanding of ad tech. And when you talk to them, I think they get the nuances of you have to protect advertising while making it transparent to the consumer. They get the small publishers. One of the things we did is we pointed out, how many folks in your state have small blogs? These are people who maybe it's just a side business, but they have a really interesting blog, and maybe that makes them an extra $5,000-$10,000 a year in advertising revenue. And that's a content creator, and we want to protect those people. Like, are they a major publisher? No. But are they making really interesting content? Yes. Is it creating value? And that's like the small businesses we want to thrive. And I think when you put it in that perspective, you really we started to see a change in their understanding of it. Now, again, will that translate into action? I'm not sure. But I was actually really pleasantly surprised over the course of about 2 years of where their knowledge came of advertising and kind of their respect of what it does for publishers. In particular, also when you link it, I think it's important with Washington that you link it to what matters to them. All of those political news sites, your local newspapers, they all depend on advertising. If you're a congressman, you probably have 1 or 2 local newspapers in your district. Those depend on advertising for revenue. Their subscriptions have been going down, and advertising has instead been kind of filling the gap there. And if we move that away, where just the news is coming from the walled gardens, I think that creates a really terrifying world and has some profound consequences, outside of our space of advertising.
Agree with that. The other night, teaching my MBA class, all marketing majors, 41 of them, we got into this conversation. And I asked them, I hate advertising. And I'm like, well, intellectually, I'm having a problem with that. Why would you tell a marketing professor you hate advertising? What we found out was they really hate bad advertising. They hate stupid advertising that insults them. It's not, but then I asked the question, okay, are you willing to pay? Are you willing to, and all of a sudden out of 41, only 2 were willing to pay. Case closed. There has to be this value exchange. And somebody piped up who is with Logitech, and she goes, well, then why don't you tell me that? Why don't I feel like that I'm not getting that value that we're giving you advertising? And I said, well, what do you think TV did and newspapers did? And it was really interesting to hear the digital mindset not think about old media. They didn't understand that was the trade-off. It was just a fascinating perspective. I mean, I throw that in because once you make it down, what's in it for me, they're not going to spend money.
Yeah, I've got teenagers. Well, they're not teenagers. I've got sons in college, and they refuse to pay for anything. And I was at the dinner. My sons know that if they bring up the fact that they have ad blockers on their machines, that I will stop paying for tuition.
I'll fail them. If you tell me you have an ad blocker, you get an F. I said, do not drop the class. You get an F. I said, that's the most ultimate insult in the world to me. I'm with you. I try to write it in a contract, an employment contract.
You make an excellent point, and there are publishers that have forced consumers to pay, and many of them have forced consumers to pay or register, and pick one, and either you receive ads or you pay. And I think that model has to it takes guts, but I definitely believe there's value exchange there, and that's what has to happen across.
That's where I think we have to do a better job. I'm glad to hear your answer. Again, I want to remind people, please send questions. We love these. Both of them have been really good. What haven't I asked you that I should be asking you about this topic? Is there something else that you want to get an opinion out, or you want to get a thought, or we want to share with each other? I guess not.
Well, I mean, I'd love to hear. I mean, again, I mean, Joanna, we were talking earlier about the spread of privacy policies in America specifically, and we talked about GDPR, yes, being the kernel for this spread. And as you look at CCPA, Virginia, Florida, and on, what are the commonalities that you're seeing that as you think about the privacy policies, coming to market, and then what are the things that you think marketers should do? What is the common denominator that marketers should prepare for as they think about? And I certainly have my own POV, but I'd love to hear it from an expert.
Yeah, so the way I see it, it's very much about what we've all been talking about for the last 5 minutes. It's more value exchange. It's putting the power back so the consumer can make the decision, understanding what they're getting in return and what they're giving up. They probably need to know a little bit more about how third-party cookies work and how information is being shared with people that don't know people that don't know people that don't have a relationship with that publisher or with that brand. It's great to hear that you're guiding brands through that with the cookie audits and all the data strategy stuff that you're doing. So that's the main thing. And, and that's just good practice anyway, having a dialogue. And I think it's important that we're really clear and transparent about what we do, which is what I think all of us are on this forum. Not running scripts in the background, third-party cookies in the background, things like that. Not if somebody's asked to opt out, that you completely delete them. You don't have it living like a ghost somewhere on the system in case with some bits of their information has already been shared with people and you can't get it back. So, I think it's just really important to be clear and transparent.
He's got 2 questions, and these are really good. Our good friend John Dutar down in Brazil. I hope you're doing well, John, and all of us know you really well. We have looked at over 2,000 publishers and advertisers in the last year, and in 8 out of 10 times, the consent management platform is in the wrong place and data is passing before the customers ask for consent. That means 80 to 90% of all the data collected is non-compliant. How do we fix and regulate that? Travis, you want to take a shot? Anybody else, please weigh in. And I got another one from Ray Curry that I want to ask in a second.
Yeah, so I think part of this is on the ad tech industry. We have to make sure that we check for the consent before we run our tours. So, maybe the publisher gets the implementation incorrectly, but we as ad tech should not be running our tours without the appropriate TCF string, without checking for that consent. So, at LiveRamp, when we run ATS in the EU, the very first thing before the script can even load, it has to check, do you have that TCF string, and is the LiveRamp character in that TCF string? If not, we have a failsafe. That script is not going to load. It's not going to run. The page is going to load just fine. Our script will just not run for that impression, and then it will keep checking. And if it gets consent, it will. But it really is I think the ad tech industry has to self-regulate here a bit. Ultimately the regulators are going to move in and regulate for us, but we should say, look, we built TCF. We have to comply with it, and we should make it where the scripts don't run, because then you get publishers and they notice. And they start flagging to the ad tech vendors, hey, why is none of my inventory getting monetized? We say, well, the reason is because our script can't run because you're not getting the right consent. As soon as we fix that, we can get your inventory monetized again. But I really do think a bit of self-regulation will go a long way here.
Anybody else want to weigh in? We've got 3 questions that have surfaced. So our ad server built their own cookieless technology using browser header data to try and create uniqueness of IDs. What is your thoughts on the pros and cons of using a technology and methodology like this about a unified ID 2.0, 3.0? Any thoughts?
I have so I don't know the specific case, but I think that having a solution that just works for that one publisher or that one advertiser isn't what we need here. We don't need 80 solutions. We don't need one solution that only works for one site. We need a few solutions that can be understood by the advertising ecosystem, that can be understood by the various different players, by the publishers, by the advertising agencies, and then by the demand side platforms and the supply side platforms. Not 22, not like less than 10, but also to your point earlier, Jonathan, not one. You're talking about SEO. I worked in SEO like 17 years ago, and we were optimizing for Bing or for Microsoft before Bing, and for Google, and then for all the different ones as well. And then now look how that has played out, and there's really only one search engine now, one big video site, couple of social media sites. So we don't want to end up with just one monopoly. It's great to get some diversified views on this panel today, but we need something that can be understood by the majority of the advertising ecosystem.
And then we got the other question. We talked about Apple, and I waited for this one, and I think this is great because customers think they're so unique. Does Amazon have the ultimate advantage because they have so much? I mean, my God, they know who you sleep with almost. They know everything about you, what you do. Should that be a concern, or do you think they abuse the information they have? I'd love for all three of you to weigh in on that. Jonathan, I'll start with you.
Does Amazon have, so Mark, hi Mark, good friend. Does Amazon have the ultimate advantage overall because they have all the information? Well, the power is going to shift. We were just having this discussion yesterday. The power is shifting to the retailers that have the relationships with all of those customers, right? So is the power with the brand that sells on the shelf, or is the power with the retailer that today owns the transaction? Amazon's a special case because they own so much more of us, whether it's Prime access, whether it's our Alexas in our rooms listening to us. You know, they're a special story there. They definitely have got a tremendous amount of power. And so what happens with that kind of power is, you know, they will, I think the walled garden walls are just going to get higher. I don't think we're going to, you touched on this before. I don't think we're going to see a lot of intentional, or at least I don't know that the walled gardens are going to play ball with the industry unless they have to, because they have a huge advantage right now. And with the cookie going away, frankly, the walled gardens will have a field day with this. And I think your concern, Joanna, earlier about what happens, and I think Travis, maybe you said it too, what happens to the little guys and all of those, the myriad sites that we count on in our communities and neighborhoods and in our passion points. How do we support them? That's going to be a pretty big deal. And so, there's no quick answer for that, Mark, except to understand as advertisers and publishers, we were thrilled. I mean, we created the Amazon monster as advertisers because we were desperate for the duopoly to have a third leg to the stool, right? So we created the Amazon monster, and now we're happy that there's competition other than Facebook and Google. But the truth is, the industry needs to support the little guys too. And so we're gonna have to figure that out as we go. And as I said before, I do think some of the answer sits with the IAB and the trade groups.
Joanna, Travis, weigh in. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think Jonathan spoke to it well. I mean, Amazon has an incredible advantage with the amount of data they have. But I also think, they're kind of a message to other retailers and other marketers of the importance of first-party data. I always look to things like this of what can you learn from them? And here's a great example of they've done a really nice job of leveraging that data to guide a consumer relationship. You were asking earlier, John, how do you explain to your family what you do? It's always fun when I go home for the holidays. I think some of them still think it's Mad Men. I'm like, I don't work in a creative agency. Don't drink martinis. Wish I did. That sounds more fun. But one of the things it's funny is my grandmother always says, she's like, I love that Amazon emails me exactly what I want. She's like, they always know exactly what I need next. And I get it in this nice email and I just have to click it and buy it. Well, Amazon's not the only one that can do it. Other marketers can learn to do that as well. So I think, Amazon's taken their first party data and done an amazing job of using it to guide a consumer journey and then drive more first party data. So I would say, certainly does Amazon have a ton of power? Absolutely. Are they the new walled garden? Definitely. But they're also a huge case study that every marketer should be looking at and saying, well, why can't we do that? Why can't we send that email? Why can't we personalize just like they do and use the open internet tools to do so? So, I look at it a little bit differently, more from that perspective.
I think you're right. When people say Amazon, it's almost a sparkle in their eye because people love the recommendation engine and it's almost a part of their life. So Joanna, any additional comment?
Yeah, I think Travis makes a really great point. Let's have marketers learn from them. But yeah, at the same time, there is the walls of the gardens are really climbing. They really are going up. We're getting more strong walls. And then I also want to say that, we talk about parties a lot, first party, third party, zero party about cookies. I have to say my life is quite Mad Men. I'll be honest. Good.
Well, I always like to ask this question. I'm never going to ask the question, oh my gosh, what's challenging about the pandemic is I think all of us have experienced the compression of time and space and physicality different. But what's been really one wonderful thing that has surfaced for you in this, what I call the new world starting March 15th, 2020? What's the new world like now for you that's in a big takeaway? What is yours like? I've discovered dishwashing at 12 noon, or I can go out and do this. What's been a big takeaway in this environment? More of a personal.
Who wants to go first? Okay, good enough. So personal. I had my first, this is a tangent. I had my first hug last night with someone who wasn't a blood relative. I'm 2 weeks out from my last vaccine, and I have to say I missed the contact with friends and friends and community. But that said, I have rediscovered all of my friends in college that we do Zoom calls every other week with my college friends, and we haven't talked in years. And now we're talking every other week, and it is like no time has passed. And I owe that to the ridiculous pandemic, that like, even though we've had the tech and Skype for 20 years, we never even thought to do it. And so it's just, that's been a funny thing about reconnecting with friends because of all of this.
Joanna?
Same for me. It sounds really selfish. So obviously this is a super serious situation. I'm seeing personally on our dashboards like a big increase in traffic to our Indian customers. So we work with a lot of major publishers across India, and of course they're seeing huge amounts of increasing readers. So I'm really hopeful that we can help them monetize those users as well in our way. So yeah, it's a serious situation, but I have been teaching myself Spanish using an ad-funded product. I'm not paying, instead of going to the gym at weekends and doing binge gym, I'm now doing yoga every single day with free yoga videos on YouTube and other websites. So that's been great. And just like you, I love the cloud, Jonathan. Thank goodness we were all in the cloud already, because I know a lot of people don't have that advantage of, digital advertising. That's just so obvious for us. But also, yeah, this technology is amazing. I can speak with our clients in Asia, in Europe, and in the US, and I feel like I'm just with you.
And Travis?
Well, I think kind of building on Joanna's point, that the technology has really enabled me to kind of put a new value on time. Pre-pandemic, it was like, how many international flights can you fit in a month? It's like, oh yeah, like we have that meeting in London, but we could go to Sydney like that same week. Like that's possible. Like you can do that. And I think, now it's really caused me to be like, it's nice to be in San Francisco on like a Wednesday night and go out to dinner and like not be traveling. And it's nice to do with the technology to be able to get some of the same meeting efficiencies done. So I think, it will be interesting as we return to, to kind of the old world, the new post-COVID world. I feel like there's a lot of opportunity where people are going to value their time much more, and we're going to see a lot less business travel and a lot more of optimizing of how can I make sure I still get the same work done, but I do it in a way that protects kind of my personal time and allows me to do hobbies like yoga or going on a run.
I was talking to a friend of mine who's a lobbyist in DC, and he handles airlines and all. He made an interesting comment, and I think, Travis, you hit it. He basically was telling the roundtable that business travel as we know it is not going to come back till 24. The idea, Jonathan, that all of us on the West Coast will take that red eye, that United 10 p.m. red eye, land in Newark, go in and shower and have lunch at Wavemaker, do a 2-hour and turn around and be on that 5 o'clock flight. Those days are over. They're just not going to happen again. But the idea of planned travel. If I'm going to go to New York, Travis, for a week, I'm going to make a week out of it. I'm going to have valued time. And I think the biggest winner in all of it is how we learned about time. It was always a currency, but I don't think we ever thought of it as a currency. The 20 minutes driving downtown to the financial district, not taking, podcast, my God, the growth of podcasting for the value of the learning. I think it's fascinating what's going to happen. I think the world of work is going to explode because we now realize the humanity of who we are as people. So I want to thank you. This is, I've got several things that y'all said. I love precision to model. That's actually, I never believed in 101, Jonathan. I thought ultimately you might find out there's only 13 Eskimos in San Jose. And why are you going to spend all that money? But I thank you all. So Deborah, thank you for letting me ask these questions of 3 engaged: San Francisco, London, and Connecticut. So Deborah, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Well, thank you, John, and thank you, panelists. This has been just really fantastic. I loved the resonation of the same points from all of you, which makes me feel a little bit more confident that in this era in which we don't get to have these conversations very often, we are going in a similar direction. And I think just a little bit of background why we started this series. So for those of you who don't know, Adepex is an ad ops consultancy, and we work for a few hundred publishers, several hundred publishers. And it's our job when there's any big disruption to find the opportunity within that disruption. And I would argue we started way back in the day. This is the biggest disruption that we have ever seen, which I believe is going to bring the biggest opportunities for those who move and move not by themselves, but in unison with the rest of us. And you know, when I was looking at who is going to be speaking, Jonathan had agreed, and I just keep repeating this, but I love a quote from their site that says, "Exponential growth requires uncomfortable change," and that's exactly where we are right now. We need to change, and although we are more concentrated on the publisher perspective, we wanted to start this series with the marketer's perspective, because what can a publisher do if we don't understand what the marketers need and want? What are their pain points? Where are their growth areas? And so I just found it, again, music to my ears that you're saying, everyone, it's not going away. This is not something that's just going to fix itself. We need to talk about, you know, John, you talked about audits and strategies, and Travis, you mentioned it's not enough to talk about it. It's important to have these conversations, but we have to test. And that's why Adepex started early in the game with LiveRamp as our first partner, ID5 as our second partner, and we're so happy to have you in this conversation, and we hope that we will continue to have this conversation going forward. The thing is Travis, you mentioned 5% of your advertisers are only buying cookieless, which I think is a pretty significant percentage. And I think that's going to grow exponentially over the coming months. And I want publishers to understand that that's the driving force around them, not just talking about it, but auditing, strategizing, testing, doing. And as you, Joanna, said, there aren't going to be 80 solutions. We don't need 80. And there's certainly not going to be one. But we need to find what are the solutions. And the only way we're going to get there is to test and to keep this conversation going together. So the series will continue. I hope that you will all join us on future editions. And we will be sending out emails to everyone who was not able to join or who would like to share this. There will be a video recording. And I would like to, here on May 20th, we will have our next event. And I just want to, at noon, same time, same bat time, same bat channel. I guess I'm aging myself. I would just like to hear from you, panelists. What would you like to tell the publishers? What do the publishers need to know from the advertisers, marketers, agencies for going forward?
So I spend most of my day speaking with publishers, Deborah. So thanks again for the opportunity to be on the panel. So publishers, don't worry if you haven't started to think about this yet. It's quite easy to move forward, to take advice if you're part of Adepex or to speak with Travis and I. There's different solutions that work for different people. Some are based on deterministic data, some on probabilistic data, some are both, some work in different geos. Travis and I both work in global companies that are activated globally. So just look at those kind of questions, turn to the experts for those kind of questions and get started with some tests.
I think, Deborah, I would follow up and really thank you for being here. But Joanna hit the nail on the head. It's time to get started and test. If you're a publisher, reach out to an identity provider, reach out to your partners, get it testing and start to measure what do the CPMs look like. Safari, Firefox, and Edge are 3 cookieless browsers. So there's plenty of opportunity to test, and there's plenty of marketers now buying on this.
Yeah, and I just, as I said, you know, if you think about the simple construct of educate, audit, and make a plan, we're trying to help our clients think through where they can, what they can expect. And we're expecting publishers to be part of this process with us. So we assume that you'll be testing, we're going to be testing. And I think that's the expectation from agencies and clients, is that when we start to dip our toes in the water to make this, you know, more serious, for brands to have a more serious and intentional data strategy, that you're there to help us and support us, especially if we want to do something direct with you. But frankly, definitely through these types of solutions we're talking about today.
John?
No, as a moderator, I thought the intelligence of all three is spot right on. I think half the battle is asking the right question and then moving to action. And don't be afraid. It's not 1, it's not 80, it's 5 or 6 or 10, but those who sit on the sidelines, a year from now, the music's going to be playing and they're going to still be standing. It's not a good position to be in. Travis said it right. Now's the time.
I couldn't agree more. So again, thank you panelists. It's just been wonderful, and thank you everyone who attended, and thank you for your questions. I love that you were participating, and I hope you will join us and participate again on our next session on May 20th. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day wherever you are.